Okay, so we are here to talk about fostering and supporting children's self-esteem, supporting children in their self-worth, making them feel good about themselves, having that pride, that accomplishment, so that they can achieve success. That's what we're here to talk about today. Now, there's a couple of really big points that I want to make today, and you'll probably hear me say the same thing over and over again several times. When we talk about how do we foster children's self-esteem, how do we get them to feel good about themselves, safety comes first, all right? Children must feel safe before they can believe in themselves. When you don't feel safe is when you start to doubt, all right? Fear comes from not feeling safe. So the first thing we have to do as early educators in our classrooms is to establish that sense of safety. Once we've established that sense of safety, then we can begin to work and practice and support the child's self-esteem. And when I say the child has to feel safe, remember, this is from their point of view, okay? Their version of reality. That's what you've got to look at. And throughout today's webinar, when we talk about self-esteem and self-worth, it's very important that you always think about this from the child's point of view, not the adult's point of view, all right? So, big golden rule number one that I want to get across to y'all when it comes to fostering children's self-esteem. Confident teachers create confident students, all right? When you're a proud early educator, when you're confident in your abilities, that you can then transfer that belief to the child. But if you're a teacher and you're in a classroom and you have doubt and you have fear and you have anxiety, then there's no way that you can support that child when you're in that state. Remember, your state dictates their state. So, in essence, the adult has to have a positive self-esteem before they can transfer that to the child. The teacher has to believe in themselves before they can get the children to believe in themselves. All right? Confident teachers create confident children. The other big golden rule that I wanted to throw out there before we get to the material is that remember, your outside voice becomes their inside voice, all right? So we talk about inner speech, and inner speech are those voices that you have inside of your head. As an adult, we have this voice inside of our head that is constantly talking to us, that's constantly, giving us direction and coaching us and sometimes making us doubt and have fear. But that voice is always here. For young children, they have immature inner speech, all right? So they don't have that voice in their head like we do. What children have are images. All right. All they see are images in their brain. They don't have that inner speech. Inner speech develops and matures all the way up until the age of 7. Okay, 7 to 8 is when inner speech starts to fully mature. So when I say your outside voice becomes their inside voice, what children hear, especially from the adults that are taking care of them, the adults that are making them feel safe, all right? The adults that are providing that structure, their voice is what's going to stick right here. And that's what the children are going to eventually hear inside of their head, is your voice. For example, how many of you, that's watching this, even as an adult, when you do something wrong or you make a mistake, you do something that you know you shouldn't have done, you can still hear your mother's voice inside of your head. Your mother, your grandmother, whoever raised you, whoever was your primary caregiver, you can still hear that voice and probably see their face, I definitely, whenever I make a mistake or I say or do something, that I shouldn't have done, I can still hear my mother to this day. Timothy J. Because you were in trouble when you got the middle name, right? The full name and the middle name, you were in big trouble. There were four of us growing up. I have three siblings, and so typically when Mom would get frustrated, she would call all of us by the wrong name. She would just go down the list of all of the kids until she got the right one. But when she got your name right the first time, and she did the full name and the middle name, you knew that you were in trouble. And again, still as an adult, when I have an oops and I make a mistake, I can hear her and I can see her, because growing up as a child, her outside voice became my inside voice. All right. So, when we're talking to children, when we're encouraging children, I want you to keep that in mind. And there's a whole part of today's presentation where we're going to talk about encouragement. All right. But we're wiring that brain. We're creating that recording that's going to play over and over again in their head. Some of you may have watched my webinar that I did a couple of weeks ago on what happens when employees call in sick and the impact that an absent employee has on young children. And in that particular workshop, we talked about the attachment figure and how, typically in a healthy relationship, the mother is the healthy attachment figure for a child. The mother is the person the child goes to when the world is not going their way and they need to feel safe and loved. It could also be the father. The reason why I say it's typically the mother is because the child was in the womb. The mother carried the child, gave birth to the child. So there's a connection there that is very unique. But the healthy attachment can also be the father. Now, in our world these days, the current statistics are that 75% of the children in this country are in some type of group care situation. So, 75% of the kids out there are with us, all right? And out of that 75%, 80% of those kids spend more of their waking hours with us than they do their own family. And we've talked about this a lot in several of our presentations, and most of you agree with that. Because of that, it's very common that we, the early educator, becomes the healthy attachment figure. All right? We are the ones that the kids go to when the world's not going their way and they need to feel safe, they need to feel nurtured, they need to feel loved. All right? So in my webinar, when we talked about what happens when employees call in sick and that absent employee, that absent teacher, when you've got a child that is searching for their healthy attachment figure and the healthy attachment figure is not there, that can be devastating. All right. Now, for this topic, supporting and fostering children's self-esteem, now that you kind of understand that we are the healthy attachment figure for this child, our outside voice is going to become the child's inside voice. All right. We've got that big of an impact. So the encouragement and the praise and the direction and the coaching that we give the children in our classroom has a lifelong impact on them. All right. Especially if you're in a situation where you are the healthy attachment figure, but the child has an unhealthy attachment figure at home. Somebody that is not encouraging them, someone that is not supportive, someone that is using a lot of negative language, that's not providing that self-worth or supporting that self-worth. You've got a conflict right here, because while they're at school, we're wiring that inner speech with praise and encouragement. but at home or in whatever environment, they're also being wired with a lot of negativity and doubt, and you're not good enough, and you're not supposed to be here. One thing you definitely never want to do is compare a child to another child. That is very damaging to their self-esteem. And I've heard teachers say this, I wish you were more like Kevin. All right, why can't you try a little harder and be more like Kevin? That's very damaging to the child's self-esteem. We've got to recognize the uniqueness and the potential of all children. All right. Now, when we talk about self-esteem, children expect to be accepted and valued by their adults and their peers. And I want to stress when I say their adults. All right, those primary caregivers, those attachment figures that they've got. So the mother, the father, the classroom teacher, it could be grandparents, because we have so many children these days that have very intimate relationships with their grandparents. 2.5 million children in this country are being raised by their grandparents, so we can definitely throw them into this category. That's what I mean by their adult, not everyone else out there. But even as adults, I want you to kind of relate to this, that, a complete stranger can say something negative to you or put you down, and you may be impacted by that, but it's really not going to mean a whole lot to you, and you're not going to remember it. Now, when someone's special to you, whether it's your spouse or your significant other or your parent, they say something negative, or they belittle you, or they put you down, that hurts, all right? And we do remember that feeling, and we don't let go of it, because it was our person that said it or did it, not a complete stranger, all right? So again, that connection, that bond that you have with your children is very important when it comes to fostering that self-esteem. Now, when we talk about fostering and supporting children's self-esteem, all of this is about the social and emotional development of the child, all right, and creating a healthy social and emotional development. Now, I thought I would throw in here, where does the blueprint for social and emotional development come from, or when does it start, all right? And I think that's important for us to discuss in this conversation. The social and emotional blueprint that is wired into our brain begins forming during the third trimester of pregnancy. All right, so during the third trimester of pregnancy is when this blueprint is starting to be created. All right, and the blueprint is created from the third trimester until the age of 2. All right, so what happens to that child from the third trimester to the age of 2 is the social and emotional blueprint that will stay with them for the rest of their life. All right, and that's on their CD-ROM, and you've got an opportunity to rewire some of that, but it doesn't go away. It's the blueprint. It's the foundation. So those of you that are working in an infant classroom, a toddler classroom, a 2-year-old classroom, the social and emotional support that you give to your children is critical. All right, this should be your primary responsibility in that classroom. Of course, keeping the children safe, keeping the children healthy, all right? But the social and emotional support is number 1 on your job description, all right? In that infant, toddler, 2-year-old classroom. It's important in the other classrooms too, but very important for y'all. We talk about the right hemisphere of the brain and the left hemisphere of the brain, and where does self-regulation and the social and emotional skills come from. We want to focus on the right hemisphere of the brain. Okay, so that's why I tell people that are pregnant, and some of you watching this, you may be pregnant. If you want to read all of the Dr. Spock books and what to expect when you're expecting and all those famous books that mothers read, expecting mothers read, that's okay for you to read that during your first and second trimester. When you get to the third trimester, you need to put the book down. All right. And during that third trimester, you need to be listening to a lot of music. You need to be singing. You need to be dancing. You need to be laughing. All right. That's what should be going on in that third trimester. And I know it's hard because that's the most uncomfortable trimester, you know. You're tired. You're very, very pregnant. You're ready for this to be over with. And it's very hard to be joyful and positive during that third trimester. But it's very critical because the social and emotional part of the brain is being wired at that moment. All right, so important right there for you to remember. All right, so I talked about a healthy attachment figure. That is someone that gives the child praise and encouragement, someone that makes them feel safe and loved. An unhealthy attachment figure is just the opposite. That is someone that puts them down, makes them feel negative, makes them feel like they're not worth enough, makes them feel like they were a mistake and they shouldn't be here. So I really want y'all to reflect on your teaching style and your presence in the classroom and identify yourself. Are you a healthy attachment figure or an unhealthy attachment figure? Because that's very critical when we're supporting children's self-esteem. All right. I want to talk about empathy as well. All right. Teaching children empathy has a very big impact on their self-esteem and their self-worth. Being able to practice and coach children to care about others and to understand other people's feelings. The more you understand and can relate to other people's feelings, the better you're going to feel about yourself. All right? Because you can connect, you can understand, you can comprehend what's going on in that world. And we know that, you know, two of the best ways to keep you in your executive state in your brain is empathy and acts of service. All right? Empathy and acts of service keeps us in our executive state. When you are in your executive state, then you can have a healthy self-esteem. All right? When you're in your emotional state and your brain is constantly asking, am I loved? All right? If you're asking yourself, am I loved? Am I cared for? Your self-esteem is struggling. All right? When you're in your survival state, your brain is asking, am I safe? When your brain is asking, am I safe? All right, then you can't feel good about yourself. You can't have that self-worth. You have a very difficult time with self-esteem at that point. So fostering and supporting children's self-esteem, we've got to keep them in their executive state. Empathy, being able to understand other people's feelings, and then acts of service, being able to support and do things for others. Now, remember, this is something for young children that we have to practice, all right, and practice, because we are born with this big ego that the world is all about us, all right? We are the center of the universe. I'm the only person that matters. That's how we're born. That's how our brain is wired. We have to teach and we have to practice cooperation and problem solving. And we have to coach and practice children on how to support other kids in the classroom. And that's why we do things like classroom jobs. That's an act of service, all right? But I bet a lot of you would agree with me, even as an adult, when you do something for someone else that is beneficial, when you help somebody, you feel good about yourself. All right? That's very, very rewarding when you can do something for someone else. That's what we've got to be practicing. And remember, we're starting in our infant, toddler, 2-year-old classrooms with this. I see some programs where They don't start practicing acts of service and empathy until they get to the 3 or 4 year old classrooms. By then, it's a little too late because remember, the social and emotional blueprint has already been created at that point. We want to get empathy and acts of service in the blueprint, all right, before the age of 2. All right, so you can still, with a young infant, hold that infant and do things for other infants and say, you know, we're going to go warm the bottle for Johnny, all right? We're going to go get a clean diaper and a wipe for Susie. And you're coaching and you're saying this to the child as you're holding them. They're going to start establishing that sense of active service, doing something that benefits others. All right, makes you feel really good about yourself. I'll tell you all a personal story, you know, ironically, that just happened to me. You know, Wednesday night when I was coming home, I found a dog on the side of the road. It was kind of late at night and there was this dog out there. We picked the dog up and brought it home and cleaned it up and immediately took pictures and put it all over Facebook. Hey, we found this dog. You know, it was a super sweet, very well-mannered dog. You know, yesterday I took the dog to the vet to see if it had a chip in it. You know, trying to locate the owner. The vet was fantastic and took a picture and put it on their website, you know, missing dog. And about 9 o'clock last night, I get a phone call. Someone had taken a screenshot of the Facebook post and called the owner of the dog and said, hey, I think this is your dog. And I get this phone call from this precious lady just bawling and crying. We had found her dog and she came and picked him up. So very happy ending to that right there. But, you know, I'll be the first to admit, you know, I was feeling pretty good about myself. You know, we did the right thing and we helped that family reunite with their precious dog. That's an act of service, all right? And that's something we want to instill in the children right here in our early education classrooms. Now, when we're talking about supporting and fostering children's self-esteem, you know, we've got to teach children that we can't always control the events in our life, but we can control our positive response to these events, and our positive response creates the outcome. I just posted this on Facebook a couple of days ago, but the E plus P equals O formula. Events, you know, plus positive energy equals the outcome. In our early education classroom, it's very important that we create that positive environment, that encouraging environment, that we wire that brain to be optimistic, all right? We need to create optimistic children so that when the world is not going their way, all right, we can still create a positive outcome. And things aren't always going to work out the way you expect, but it's going to be okay, all right? And we've got to instill that in the children. The world is not always going to go your way, but with your optimistic attitude, you can find the silver lining in everything, all right? That's what we've got to teach right there. Now, again, it starts with the adult. All right, I said at the beginning of the webinar, you know, confident teachers create confident children. When we talk about being optimistic and being positive, it starts with the adult. All right, you've got to be that positively contagious classroom teacher in order to support children's self-esteem. All right, if you have an adult in a classroom that's negative, that's bossy, that is always looking at what's wrong with the world, always looking at what's wrong with the kids, I hate my job, I hate this place, that's what they're downloading to the children. All right? So, you know, directors and administrators that are out there watching this video, you got to pay very close attention to the attitudes of your employees. Because if you have an employee that is upset, that is stressed, that is stressed and negative, when they go into that classroom, they're going to download those emotions to the children. And that can be very damaging to their self-esteem. And you have to work hard at being positive. You have to work hard at being optimistic. This does not come naturally, especially in the world that we're living in right now. Okay? But remember, your state dictates their state. So we've got to make sure as leaders that, we're pumping our staff up and we're bringing out the best in them and we're putting that smile on their face so that when they go in the classroom, they transfer that to the children. Okay? But that's what I mean by that. Children with a healthy sense of self-esteem feel that the important adults in their life will accept them, care about them, and would go out of their way to ensure that they are safe and well. All right? This is important, and again, I keep going back to the infant, toddler, 2-year-old classrooms, and I know, some of you are 3-year-old teachers, 4-year-old teachers, working in an after-school program. It's all relatable right here. But I'll use an infant classroom as an example. In an infant classroom, a child may get fussy and start to cry because they have a basic need that needs to be met. All right, they're hungry, they're dirty, they're tired. And you may have, 8 children in your infant classroom with 2 caregivers, and you can't immediately get to that child that has an unmet need. You're feeding another baby, you're changing another diaper, but I've got this child over here with an unmet need. That's okay, and you don't need, you're not going to be able to drop what you're doing and go to every single child when they have an unmet need like that. But what is important is that we establish the connection that even when the world is not going my way and I have an unmet need, I trust that my adult will eventually get to me. All right? That's what we've got to establish, and it starts in that infant room. All right? I'm hungry, I'm dirty, I'm tired, but I know that my adult will eventually get to me. All right? And that's what we've got to establish, and that goes on to the toddler room, the 2-year-old room, and then all the way up. That even though I have an unmet need right now and the world is not going my way, my person will eventually be there for me. And I trust that that person will be there for me, that will care about me, that will provide that stability and that safety. It may not be right now, but I trust that they will eventually be there. Now, for some children, we have kids that have experienced situations where their adult wasn't there for them and they didn't get to them and they didn't take care of that need. So it creates some distrust, all right? And when that child doesn't have that trust, when they have that fear that I'm going to be abandoned again or that my need is not going to be met, all right, that starts to create a negative sense of worth. All right, they don't feel good about themselves. They can't feel good about themselves because they're living in fear. All right. So, again, going back to my training I did on what happens when employees call in sick and the impact that it has on the children. When you've got this child that's trying to establish trust, and they're trying to make that connection that someone will eventually meet my need. The key here is consistency, all right? A consistent adult in their life that's going to be there for them. Even the child care licensing minimum standards addresses, that children have consistent caregivers in their classroom. All right, we need to have the same person in that classroom so that they can establish that sense of trust. All right, when you've got inconsistent caregivers, you've got a different teacher in that classroom every day. You've got a revolving door of employees with your turnover. All right, the child never is able to make that connection. All right, and it's very hard for them to have a positive self-esteem when they've got that fear. Okay, so consistency is the key. Consistency is the key. There's been a lot of scientific research behind this, that children who have inconsistent caregivers during the first year of life struggle with social and emotional skills, and children that have inconsistent caregivers during the first year of life struggle with self-esteem. All right? So infant teachers that are out there, y'all got to be in it to win it. All right. And you got to be there for those kids and make that long-term commitment, because that first year is so critical. Now, when we get into our 3- and 4-year-old classrooms, when we get into our after-school programs, I want y'all to look at the fact that sometimes you may have children in your classroom that have experienced some sense of trauma. All right. Some sense of trauma from their point of view. So that consistency is going to be extremely important for those children as well. Children must feel safe. They must feel valued. Okay, and that needs to be, again, right up there at the top of your job description whenever you're coaching and practicing with the children in the classroom. All right. Now, they're not always going to feel good about themselves. Even as adults, we don't always feel good about ourselves. We may be tired, we may be hungry, we may be stressed, we may not feel good. And that's always going to have an impact on how we feel about ourselves. Children are no different. They're going to have negative feelings. They're going to be sad. They're going to be angry. They're going to be anxious. They're going to be frustrated. It's very important that you recognize that and you make sure they know it's okay to have those feelings, all right? Now, we can coach them and support them during these times of needs, and then get them back to their executive state so that they can feel good about themselves. But, the world isn't always going to be rainbows and unicorns, all right? It's not always going to be wonderful and positive. We're going to have moments, all right? But it's going to be okay. And you need to recognize that while working in the classroom. When you're supporting your children and you're encouraging your children, you need to let them know that it's okay to make a mistake, all right? We all make mistakes. I made a big mistake this morning, all right? I've told 2 people about it. Like, man, I messed up this morning. We all make mistakes. Young children are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Mistakes are opportunities to learn. Mistakes are opportunities to be better. But when you're in the classroom and you're working with your children, no matter what age group you're working with, we need to use the language, oops, you made a mistake, but I still love you. All right? When a child makes a mistake, it's important that they know that you still love them, that you still care for them, that you're still going to be there for them. Just because they made a mistake doesn't mean you're going to desert them and leave. All right? Oops, you made a mistake. All right, I still love you. Tomorrow, we'll try again. All right? With behavior, when we're working with aggressive behavior, oops, we made a commitment to keep it safe today. You made a mistake, all right? You hit Susie on the playground in the shoulder. We'll try harder tomorrow, all right? But I still love you even though you made that mistake. Another really big point that I want to get across when it comes to supporting children's self-esteem, children know when you're faking it. All right, you've got to be sincere. You've got to be genuine. We've all heard that phrase, fake it till you make it. All right, well, we used to say that a lot, especially back in the 90s. I think I even used to train people to say that, fake it till you make it. Put a smile on your face and jump in there. Well, we now know that that's a bunch of BS, all right? And children know when you're faking it. So when we're going into the classroom to support their self-esteem, to encourage them, to praise them, to give them that self-worth, it has to be genuine and it has to be real, all right? If you're just reading a script and you're just saying what you know you're supposed to be saying, but you don't really mean it, that's not going to be supportive to the child. And I understand that there are some children in your classrooms that it's very, very difficult for you to stay positive and encouraging and loving to them. We have some difficult behaviors. I want you to rewrite the script right here. And that difficult behavior or that aggressive behavior is an opportunity for you. All right? That child is giving me an opportunity. All right? But you've got to believe in the child more than they believe in themselves. I say this to leaders, all right, whenever I'm doing leadership trainings. You've got to believe in your employees more than they believe in themselves, and you transfer that belief. All right, so for the classroom teachers, you've got to see the children through loving eyes, and you've got to see the children through optimistic eyes, and then you transfer that belief down to them. But it's got to be sincere, it's got to be genuine, or you're not going to support them with their self-esteem right there. A great way to support children with their self-esteem and their self-worth is to give choices. Choices are fantastic, all right? Even as an adult, we like choices. Our brain really, really enjoys getting a choice, all right? So, you know, with young children in the classroom, you know, Leslie, it looks like you're having a hard time picking up the blocks. It's hard. It's hard when you still want to play with the blocks, but it's time to pick up now. Leslie, you can pick up the red blocks or you can pick up the blue blocks. Which works best for you? All right, that's a choice. I need to add a word into that right there. Leslie, you can pick up the red blocks first, or you can pick up the blue blocks first. Which works best for you? All right? And it's amazing how, wow, I'll pick up the red blocks. All right? And then she picks up the red blocks, and you did it. You picked up the red blocks so that the other children will be safe. All right? And always add that. Whenever you're doing your encouragement, you pushed in the chair so that the other children can walk safely to the bathroom. So not just you pushed in the chair or you lined up, you know, with your hands by your side. Add the benefit. Okay, so when you're encouraging and you're boosting that self-esteem, acknowledge the action and add the benefit. All right? You walked slowly to the door to line up to go outside so that the other children were safe around you. All right? So add that benefit right there. Lots of engagement. So when you have children that are struggling with a positive self-esteem, when you have children that are really struggling with their self-worth, they have a lot of doubt in their brain, your engagement is everything. You've got to be there for them. All right? Remember, they are expecting that adult to be there for them, to keep them safe, and to help them when the world is not going their way. Engagement is everything. All right? And, you know, I see this a lot whenever I'm doing classroom observations, that I see a teacher that is, you know, physically present in the classroom, but they're not mentally engaged. All right. It's more about, you know, just being counted in ratio. Well, I'm just in here so that the classroom is in ratio. I'm just standing in here and I'm supervising the children. That's all I got to do here is just count in ratio and supervise the kids. It's more than that. You've got to be mentally engaged, all right, to support that child and to give them that self-worth. You've got to be interested and connected to what's going on in their world. That engagement is going to create the connection. All right. So what do we want to do to create that engagement? What are the four big elements right here that when we're talking about engagement and we're talking about meaningful connections? All right. Eye contact. So looking at the children in the eye, acknowledging them. All right. Physical touch. All right. Young children need physical touch. All right, especially when it comes to fostering their self-esteem and supporting their self-esteem. That physical touch, all right, it ignites the brain. That helps with the connection. Now, I know right now, in this present time that we're in, this is difficult because we're being encouraged to, practice physical distancing, to stay 6 feet apart from each other. And while I understand the intent behind that, because of the health risk, because of the virus that's going around, I get it. I totally get it. I'm not happy about it, though. I can understand it and I can get it, but not be happy about it because our young children need physical touch. All right? That is so important for their growth and their development. Now, if you can do this in a safe and healthy manner, all right, then we can do it. I mean, even y'all seen all the videos and everything about instead of high fives and hugs, doing the elbow bump or whatever it takes. But, that physical touch is important right there. We were talking earlier this week about, I was doing another webinar for another organization. But when we talk about rituals and routines, a lot of our rituals and routines that we do to support children involve physical touch, whether it's clapping games or hugs or handshakes. So, over the last 4 or 5 months now, we've had to make a lot of adaptations to that. How can we still have those social connections and support the children emotionally without the touch? All right. And it's hard. We can do air high fives. We can do the elbow bumps. We can do the knee bumps. It's just not the same. All right. But if you can give that physical touch in a healthy and meaningful way, I still encourage that right there. Presence. Okay. Again, I talked about the engagement. You've got to be mentally present. You got to be mentally vested in that child, all right, to be able to support their self-esteem and their self-worth, all right? So I'm not just physically here. I'm not just counted in ratio. I'm not just standing here supervising the kids. I am mentally focused and engaged in the children and their activities, all right? And then the last one, that when it comes to the meaningful connections and supporting their self-esteem, is be in a playful situation. All right? Playful situation, a stress-free environment, an environment that is free of chaos. All right? And you can still have a structured classroom full of routine, full of ritual, that is still positive and playful and you're having fun, all right? And in fact, totally different webinar that we could do right here. The structure and the routine is when the children are going to feel safe, then they can play with value, all right? So I'll go over these 4 things once again when supporting children's self-esteem and supporting their self-worth. Eye contact, physical touch, being present in a playful situation. That's what we've got to look at. Another very important task that you have to practice in your early education classroom in order to support children's self-esteem is that you have to maintain your composure. All right, as a classroom teacher, we all know the world's not always going to go your way. Your classroom is not always going to go the way you want it to go or the way you predicted. You're going to have moments of upset. You're going to have moments of chaos. Your composure lets the children know that they are safe. Your composure lets the children know that they have value and it's okay to feel good about themselves. And then you're going to download that composure to the children. And you're going to practice these skills so that they can maintain composure when the world doesn't go their way. But it starts with you. All right? Now, the skill right here is no one can make you angry without your permission. And, I talked earlier about maintaining that positive and optimistic attitude, that when you have an event in your life, your positive attitude will create the outcome, will have an impact on the outcome, all right? And even if the outcome isn't what you want it to be, you still have a positive look on that, all right? But it starts with being able to practice. No one can make you angry without your permission. No one can make you stressed without your permission, all right? And we've got to work with the children on this. It is their choice to get angry. It is their choice to become sad. It is their choice to become frustrated. And they've got control over that. Now, I use the word practice a lot because it's going to take you years to get the children to understand this. But we can start it right there in the infant classroom. All right. I talked about routines. Routines are extremely important to boost self-esteem because routines create predictability. And in order for a child to be confident, in order for a child to feel safe, in order for a child to believe in themselves, you've got to have predictability. All right? Predictability creates safety. Okay? So do you have an environment where the child can predict what's going to happen from one moment to the next? All right? Even when the world doesn't go their way, there's predictability on how it's going to be handled. All right? So consistency, structure, routine are critical when supporting children's self-esteem. All right? So those things have to be established, and that's going to set the children up for success. All right? I want you to kind of really reflect back on some of the words that you use in your classroom and the impact that it has on the children. So, for example, if you say to a child, I like the way you're sitting quietly. Okay? You say, I like the way you're sitting quietly. What the child hears in their brain is you like me when I sit quietly. All right? So when I'm not sitting quietly, you must not like me. All right? I noticed that you picked up your friend's pencil. Okay? I noticed that you picked up your friend's pencil. All right? What the child's brain just heard is that you noticed me. You noticed me when I was helpful. All right? And that child being noticed is very important to their self-esteem. All right? So you're going to use these words in your classroom. When you see the child, they do something helpful, I noticed that you pushed in the chair so that the other children will be safe in the classroom. All right? The child is over here going, she noticed me. And she noticed me being helpful. All right? Now, let's do a negative one right here. I can't stand your constant chatter. All right? What the child's brain just heard is you can't stand me. All right? So even though you're pointing to a particular behavior, the child's brain just heard you can't stand me. All right? So, use those words. That was helpful. You turned on the sink so that Leslie could wash her hands. That was kind. All right? So it doesn't always have to be that was helpful, but that was kind. All right? You took Maria her jacket when she was cold. That was very caring. All right. So we're adding those feelings, we're adding those taglines to the children's actions. I noticed that you did this and that it was kind, it was helpful, it was caring. All right. All of those words right there are boosting that self-esteem. It's boosting that self-worth right there. And at the beginning of the webinar today, we talked about those acts of service. And you notice those acts of service and you end it with how it was helpful, how it was kind, how it was caring. All right? All of those types of things. Okay, so that was a lot of information in a very short amount of time, all right? And a lot of skills that we have to practice, all right? You're not going to get this overnight. It's something that we practice every single day, all right? But the more we practice, the more this becomes a second language for us, all right? And you'll notice that you just start using these skills, you start using this language without even noticing that you're doing it. I have found, myself doing this a lot, even interacting with adults, that was helpful. I actually have, a group of friends, my little chosen family group of friends, and they kind of sort of make fun of me, but I kind of like it because I say that was helpful a lot. You picked up the dishes and brought them to the sink. That was very helpful. And so now it's kind of an ongoing joke that, I've got this whole group of friends, saying that was helpful. And even though they're kind of sort of making fun of me, we taught a new skill. All right. And even with those adults, we're boosting that self-esteem right there. So it's pretty cool stuff right there. But you got this. Just keep practicing, be positive, be engaged, all right? Notice your children, notice them, let them know when they're being helpful, when they're being kind, when they're being caring, all right? And boost that self-esteem and boost that self-worth, all right? Very good. Hope you all enjoyed today's webinar. I look forward to seeing all of you again really soon.